Good morning, CNAR virtual attendees, and welcome to Fair and Square. My name is Colleen Wetter, and I'm pleased to be a CNAR board member. I'm also the principal lawyer of Wetter Law. I'm very happy to welcome Melanie Sicotte, who is the CEO and Registrar of the Alberta College of Speech-Language Pathologists and Audiologists. Welcome, Melanie.
Thank you, Colleen.
So what can you tell me about this FAIR decision-making tool?
So, Colleen, it's the FAIR Framework was developed by ACSLPA by staff and has been continued to be changed by staff since then. It's a decision, it supports our discretionary decision making. And it was developed back in 2022 as a way for us to ensure that the fundamental principles of the college are considered in discretionary decision making. And so we're a small college, and so we were trying to think of a creative way to make sure that these principles and the ethos of the college are considered consistently. And so some of those principles are principles of administrative fairness, right touch regulation, just culture, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, and our college's mission, vision, and values. And so we developed this tool as a way to make sure that we're all considering those things as we make our discretionary decisions.
That is fantastic. When you say discretionary decisions, do you mean statutory decisions or any decision involving sort of a communication with your membership or with each other or with your board or all of that?
So sometimes it's statutory decisions, but sometimes those aren't so discretionary. Our legislation just tells us what we need to do. And so using the framework might bring in elements that the legislation doesn't want us to bring in. But there's often times when we're considering things, applications, for example, from new applicants, and legislation or policy doesn't speak to what needs to be considered. And so this is to support people in making those sorts of decisions. And we also consider it in policy and developing policy. Sort of anytime, I don't know, you've worked at regulators as well, when there's a decision and everyone's like, how are we going to make this? This is one of the tools that we turn to right away. We turn to it as a group. We'll use it to support our discussions as a group. We turn to it individually. And I think I was telling you earlier that we have meetings about it regularly. And at one of our meetings last week, people were talking about how it sort of becomes innate, how people still refer to the tool sometimes, but after there's been some experience with it, you don't refer to it as often. You sort of realize that you're going through it in your mind as you make your decisions. So really nice how it just sort of becomes part of how we make decisions as well.
That's fantastic. And your FAIR, I noticed, spelled FAAIR. And what does that acronym stand for?
It's the F is frame, the first A is acknowledge, the second A is assess, the I is implement, and the R is to review. So the goal is that we do review our decisions as well and learn from them.
And so that framework, is it sort of applied uniformly with every decision-making process, or is it something that a person could draw things out of to apply a decision-making framework for their particular situation or problem?
That's a really good question, Colleen. So our definition of what FAIR is includes what it is not. And so it is not a decision-making, a decision tree, and it is not a checklist of questions. So the framework itself does have questions under each of those letters and under each of those headings, but they're questions to consider. So sometimes when I have a decision to make, there'll be some questions that just aren't applicable or aren't as relevant to this decision. But you go through and look at them and no, this one isn't as relevant for this decision. So it's a flexible tool in that way because, like you said, you can consider the things you need to reflect on and be prompted with the questions that are there to make sure that you have considered looked at it from different perspectives and considered all the pieces that you should consider in your decision making.
That is so interesting. You mentioned that the development of the tool or the framework began in 2022. And so what steps have your organization taken to sort of enable the development and work through it before it's implemented across your organization?
Yes. Well, I should give it did start in 2022, and we had a full day event where staff got together. It was a need that some of us had identified, and how to make sure we actually were using these principles when we weren't able to do it in the ways maybe some larger colleges were. So we had a full day event of meetings and talked about it and went through all the principles and had a really good working group about it. And then 2 members of staff got together and did the first draft. There were more meetings to refine it, and then we started using it. And since then, what we've been doing is the meetings, like I talked about. We have regular meetings, depending on where we are at in the process. Sometimes they're every 2 weeks, sometimes they're every 2 months. And people will go through decisions that they've made. People will provide feedback on how the framework's working for them. And then we make changes based on staff feedback and people's experience with the tool. And so I think that's how it's been used. Recently, we've started rolling it out to our statutory committees, training them on the FAIR framework and supporting them with using it as they need to with discretionary decisions. And excitingly, just last month, we trained our council on it. So our council learned about it, and we'll be supporting them with using the FAIR framework. It'll be a little bit different. They won't go through the questions themselves, but staff, when we write briefings for our members of council, we will incorporate the relevant questions from the FAIR framework into the briefings that they review in preparation for the decisions that they will make.
That is just brilliant. That I'm sure will help your council make more thoughtful and thorough decisions, having those thorough briefing notes. I love that.
I think it will help staff too. I mean, we have some experience writing briefings, right, but I think it will be a new side too to help us make sure we have really thorough briefing notes for our council to really support them with good decision making.
And so do you feel that the FAIR framework now is it finished? Is it past the sort of beta testing phase and now into the full implementation phase?
I think we're through the first part of beta testing. I feel like with staff, we're through the beta testing with staff, but with our statutory committees and our council, we'll be continuing to collect data. So, we've done some training for them, but we will continue to collect their feedback on how it's working for them, and the feedback on how our training was. Was our training adequate? What training needs to be done differently in order to make it an effective tool for these different types of users who don't live the ins and outs of regulation every day like those of us on staff do.
So true. Do you imagine that the tool might be sort of customized for particular groups of decision makers, or that it will evolve as decision making becomes more mature or requires different considerations?
I think that's a really good question, Colleen. And I think as we go through and we get the feedback from those new groups that are going to start using it, I think we'll know more. I do wonder if we'll have there'll be FAIR version A and FAIR version B.
Yes.
But right now we're trying to have the same tool and just customize how it's being used in terms of more support for statutory committees and using a briefings approach for our council. But we'll get feedback and it may very well evolve, just like the framework has through staff's feedback.
That's fantastic. I can just imagine. I have a little bit of exposure to the framework myself, having worked with you, and imagine that it could be useful for many regulators in different contexts, even with a different cultural and perhaps mission of their college.
Yeah, we find it really helpful. And again, referring to our meeting last week that we had with staff, we have a couple staff who have moved into new positions recently or who are new to our organization. And to hear them talk about how helpful it is to them too, how helpful it is as they change roles and maybe questions that weren't relevant in their old role, it's really good to have them there so that they can consider those in their new roles. It make me think it's a good tool, and it does have some flexibility to it.
That is fantastic. Well, thank you, Melanie, so much for joining me to talk about ACSLPA's FAAIR Framework and for sharing this interesting and innovative development with our CNAR audience.
Thank you for having me, Colleen. It's a great opportunity. Thank you.